Hey, this is Kevin. I just wanted to bring my Achaemenid Persian armies into YouTube. I think they're some of the, I really love this army, and it really started with my love of learning about Cyrus the Great. It started with this man who was the founder of the Persian Empire in 550. He is an exciting character to read about. And of course, there's a lot of names that come to mind after Cyrus's death of his son Cambyses, and then Darius, and then Xerxes and Artaxerxes. Some of the most colorful armies that you'll ever paint or put on the table. And I have to say, no pushover whatsoever. But this empire that Cyrus and his successors created was absolutely huge. It was our first empire ever in the world. It stretched from the Indus and India all the way into Greece and Egypt. It was massive. If you look at it compared to the United States today or Europe, you can see how far this empire actually stretched. Absolutely magnificent. Can you imagine being a foot soldier or a cavalryman in this army saying we have to march to Greece and oh, by the way, we have to come back to India and then go back to Egypt for a revolt? I don't think so, but they did. If you're building this army, I have to say you can use just about any figure you possibly want to and mix it into this. You can use Indians, you can use Bactrians, Arcosians, Scythians, Armenians, Egyptians, Babylonians, Greeks. I mean, it is a multitude of different cultures. And I think just about anything that you have or that you build will fit, because the individual provinces were charged with their own defense. You don't have to put out a gigantic battle, but you can build a Persian army very easily by throwing different things together. You know, without talking any further, let's go ahead and take a look at what I've built. This is one of my first armies that I built. I bought some of them already painted, but I had to retouch them up. Some of them I painted myself. And so it really is kind of a collection of figures from close to 15 years ago, or maybe longer. Essex at the time had most of the figures for the Persian armies. But slowly other firms brought things in, chariot miniatures. And then, of course, to modern day, you've got Zeiston and you've got Khorasan and others. I really loved touching this army up, painting this army with all of the different colors that you could imagine that I got from reliefs and books and prints from a lot of different companies. I'll go into showing these a little bit more in depth later, but really the backbone of this army are its archers, with a very small line in front of men with wicker shields. It has a chariot-sized chariot punch. It has elite troops, and it has light troops. It has a myriad of different kinds of nations and troop types that you can use from the Greek islands all the way to the Indian borders. And you can see by these images, you can just about throw anything in there that you want, paint it any way that you want in reality. But the Persians and the Medes were very, very colorful. If you read Xenophon or you read Herodotus, you'll see how they described what they looked like. And of course, if you read about Cyrus's inventions of the chariot and how he wanted to use them, that was really, in my opinion, the first battle tank. These men that fought were courageous, they were tough, and they were built on archery, missile, and heavy cavalry or light cavalry punches. So they were a force to reckon with and very, very interesting. So here, if you look at my troops, I've painted them in what I thought they looked like for me. I painted them in yellows, bright colors, and stripes, because that's what they had. But a little bit of a fantasy of what kind of colors that you choose to use. I threw in Scythian archers, as you can see here, and Sogdians. I threw in all kinds of different nations and my idea of colors and what they might have looked like. The Sparabara I took as just a front line of spear with wicker shields, with bow, and a line of skirmishers, of slings and javelin, and just really a very heavy missile army. I mean, you have to love chariots with side. That was one of Cyrus's inventions when fighting the Medes. They weren't quite used to that particular tactic. I won't go into the history, but it caused a lot of mayhem, I'll tell you that. The Persians relied heavily on their cavalry. The Medes and the Persians were a horse nation. I threw in all kinds of different tribes, different lands to form what I thought was a multicultural ethnic group of an army. Different languages, different styles. Those there are guard heavy cavalry. I threw in Carians on the Greek coast, Lydians, Greeks, and of course the immortal infantry that were the old Essex models, but I quite liked them. And then of course Cyrus the Great, or his offspring in a 4-horse white chariot, the royal one. Every figure I have here is a group of different nations or different peoples, and I think that making this army is probably one of the easiest, and probably the one that brought the most joy, of just buying all kinds of different figures from different companies and painting them up to represent this gigantic, huge, multicultural force. The early Achaemenid armies didn't differ much from the later ones, except in maybe the composition of cavalry, the composition of their front line. They started to use much more Greek mercenaries, because they found how tough they were in their first invasions of Greece. Started to rely on more light peltast type infantry, but they maintained their immortals. They just the outfit and how they dressed and how they came to the battlefield might have looked a little bit different. But you can see from my line here, it really does look like it might have looked during that time. The cavalry that I painted, you can see I brought in some Greeks. I brought in Lydians and other nations, just to form this just gigantic mob of different countries that worked very well in unison, based on banners and flags of animals that were sacred to the Medes and the Persians. But I'm not the best painter, but I try my best to represent how I think people would look. And of course, this army was painted over close to a 25-year period, if not longer. I don't mean to date myself, but I think that I started this back in the early 2000s. But this is the army that you would have found at the Battle of Marathon. You would have found this same army at Thermopylae or Plataea. All of those classic Persian against Greek armies. But let's move on now to how this army morphed, bringing in the later army of the Persians, and how that might have changed. So this is the same army again, just how it might have changed or morphed. I've added more Babylonian cavalry. Their line has been replaced now. Instead of the wicker shield, you've gone more to more of a hoplite based mercenary carrying Lydian, Ionian states, and heavy hoplite mercenaries. The Persian infantry moved over to using more metal shields, moving away from the wicker, and trying to emulate as best they could what they thought they could survive on the battlefield. Persian Kardakis and your immortals would have changed to maybe reflect more of a hoplite warfare. Here's just some ideas of what I thought that they might have looked like artistically, and I think that my dear friend Phil Chamara from Washington painted these for me, and he's just a lovely individual, wonderful artistic painter, and I just wanted you to know this wasn't my work. This is the work of Phil, and I very much respect him and his knowledge and his ability. But I still think that the late Achaemenid army that you would have found facing Alexander brought in much more of the Indian contingent, which you see here, the elephants, different light troops that maybe emulated more of your peltasts. And these figures are from Zeiston, and I think they paint it up just lovely, kind of giving you a little bit of a reflection of what they could look like. But that was my idea of a late Achaemenid Persian battle line: hoplites, immortals, Kardakis in light troops, very mobile, maybe some elephants, even though they might have been half-hearted in the Persian army, and still very heavy archer-related. Their cavalry was still fierce, swift, and difficult to beat, but I think that the Greeks also had evolved to counteract this threat. But these figures from Zeisson, I think, turned out really nicely and reflected some of the different cultures towards the east: Bactria, Arcosia, etc. But here's the army in its entirety, if you can see, and sweeping across. The units are based on a 80 millimeter frontage by a 60 millimeter depth for cavalry and a 40 millimeter depth for the infantry. I found that that works well playing just about any gaming system that I enjoy. As long as your armies are based the same, that you should be all right. You can even see there I threw in some Egyptian spearmen to the back of the camera, which I really enjoyed. I probably should paint up a few more of those because of the Egyptian contingency. But I think that the army, the way I built it, reflects exactly what I was looking for. In a couple of the next videos, I'm going to be showing you how this army was in action in battles, throwing out maybe 2 or 3, how it actually fought historically. And it was definitely not a pushover and was a huge and great empire for a reason. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me. I got some new figures in from Old Glory. Yay. That'll come on the painting table here pretty soon. I got some new books in, some of my old ones and some new ones I've got to read through, and have the Spanish on the painting table, and I'll see you soon. Next up will be the World War II British, and also a video about how I came to all of this madness. See you soon on the next video.